Hello, my name is Ruth Nelson, and welcome to this week's MasterCoaches Weekly Buzz hosted by John Foreman. Our most recent interviews with 13th year Florida State head coach Chris Poole and 4th year Georgia head coach Tom Black provided us a great update on ACC and SEC fall schedules and what the spring NCAA tournament might look like. Our news flash: there are now 18 states now playing high school volleyball this fall, and this includes California, Minnesota, Illinois, and Colorado, all being hotbeds for recruiting talent. To stay up with high school changes, go to nfhs.org. Check out coachesinsider.com for an update on what high school athletic directors are thinking, and for junior club volleyball, go to jvavolleyball.org. Did you know Brian Gemolero, 8 years at Gar High School, compiled a 142-15 record and 8 years straight to the CIF playoffs? Bob Bertucci continues to run one of the most successful volleyball camp programs in the country. Even during COVID, he created social distance, wore masks, and still gave players some court time. And Mick Haley, while at Texas, won 9 Southwest Conference titles, and with 9 times with a 10-0 record. All will be asking guests the tough questions on types of contracts, agent, attorney or not, and when and how should you get them involved in your contract negotiations. First, let's go to former Olympic coach Mick Haley, who will introduce our guest today. Mick?
Thank you, Ruth. But did you know Ruth Nelson has done it all? She was a USA national team player, assistant coach, has coached 3 Division I programs, Houston, LSU, and Iowa. She coached in the pro leagues and has now been developing 2 youth volleyball programs called Bring Your Own Parent, BYOP, and Go Kids for basically 12 and unders, and has done one other amazing thing. She was Penny Lucas's coach in one of the pro leagues. So that's pretty good. We have 2 amazing guests today. The first is Penny Lucas White, USA national team player, international league player, played in the pro leagues here and overseas, has coached at Memphis State, Air Force, and now at Alabama State. And Penny and I were in Colorado Springs together. Geez, Penny, it doesn't seem like over 20 years ago, but we certainly were doing a lot of talking at that time. You've negotiated a lot of contracts over your years, so welcome to this program. And our second guest is Garry Rosenfield, who works for a group called Coaches, Inc. He's been doing this for about 10 years, and he's been assisting coaches with their contracts in women's basketball, soccer, and volleyball. I listened to his ABCA podcast yesterday and was really informative. The guy has a lot of information to share, and if you have a chance to go back and listen to that, I would suggest you do that also. Welcome, Garry, and I'm going to move right into the first question so we can move along here. How did you get involved with the ABCA volleyball, the ABCA, which is the American Volleyball Coaches Association? And are most of the collegiate volleyball contracts similar at-will contracts lasting 3 to 5 years? And if not, can you explain? I'm going to turn it right over to you and let you run with it.
Well, I appreciate it. It's great to be here with so many talented coaches and looking forward to helping. To dive right into it, I get connected to the ABCA because as I was representing women's basketball coaches, we created a partnership with the Women's Basketball Coaches Association. From there, that led to a partnership with an organization that's now known as Women Leaders in College Sports. At the time, they were known as NACWA at the time, and that's the Association for Female Collegiate Administrators in College Sports. And I was at a NACWA convention when I connected with Kathy DeBoer, who asked if she could grab a couple minutes of my time and shared with me that she knew about our partnership with WBCA and that she felt like volleyball coaches could use similar services. And really from there, I asked Kathy to connect me with a couple of volleyball coaches just to learn a little bit about the sport, about the intricacies and the nuances of women's volleyball and the coaches within it. And from there, partnered with the ABCA and have been partners with Kathy and her team for the last 4 or 5 years or so at this point. So that's my history with the ABCA. In terms of your second question, as it relates to the majority of contracts, Mick, the majority of the coaches that I work with in a private capacity are Division I volleyball head coaches, and I don't work with a lot of them. So let me just get that out there. But the majority of the coaches that I do work with have similar contracts from the sense of they're usually multi-year contracts, and usually in terms of the way that we're adding value or that I'm adding value to those contracts is all relatively similar, right? It's focusing on the salaries, it's focusing on the years, it's focusing on the termination language, it's focusing on all these things. But some of the other areas that we've really become accustomed to assisting coaches with are with little language changes that at the time don't make a lot of, they don't seem very important because it's our job to look at worst case scenario. But when they become important is with times like right now. So as an example, when I tell a coach that we want to change something in their contract relating to the school's ability to alter their salary, at the time, there doesn't seem like there's any reason why a school would alter a coach's salary. And granted, nobody can anticipate a pandemic coming down the line. But when something like this happens, it's really valuable that we're evaluating the entire contract and not just the salary or the bonuses or whatever it might be. So I've found that with coaches that I've spoken to at the ABCA convention, a lot of the coaches that want to meet with me are talking about multi-year contracts, but there definitely are Division I head volleyball coaches that I've met with who have year-to-year contracts, one-year contracts, or even employees at will. So it really varies.
Oh, wow. Brian?
Yeah, I didn't know if you were going to go to Penny with that or not.
No, sorry. Well, I should. So Penny, in your experiences, all these contracts that you've negotiated, overseas contracts, national team contracts, and 3 universities here in the United States, how does that line up with what Gary's saying?
I think Garry is right on point. I think the advantage that I had is that I worked for a lot of lawyers who are now attorneys, who are now judges in Louisiana. And one of my most favorite people when I first started playing abroad as well as negotiating contracts is I've always given my contract to an attorney. I think the good thing about having someone negotiating for you or on the front end speaking for you, it takes the personal out and it becomes all business. And now it's not, if something that you just don't agree with and something you just really want to be a part or in your contract, they don't look at it as a personal offense or wow, she's aggressive, but there's someone that's on the inside fighting on your behalf that's just handling the business side for you. So I think it's a great thing to have someone negotiate your contract.
And one last thing, did your contracts match up with what Garry was saying, that most of the contracts that he's dealt with?
He's done a good job, but I tell you, I've had some really nice contracts, and I've seen some of the contracts. I've spoken to some of the people that he represents, and I think that's great. I just think, normally if you get a cost of living increase, that's found somewhere between, let's say 1 to 5%, but really you probably might negotiate somewhere in the 2 to 3. My guy did a wonderful job. I spent 15 years at the Air Force Academy. I had a 5% increase every year, automatic.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I can go. My guy was good. And I'm not bragging, but he was also an attorney. He was also an attorney, and I worked for them for years when I played for Ruth at LSU. And it's just, it's just a little job I used to go to and I used to work with, and those lifelong relationships have really benefited me. And it just carried on to where when I played abroad, he took care of my contract, to even to the point when I came here, he took a look at all of my contracts.
Penny, I think I should have had you negotiate my contract. It's nice to see you again. I kind of had a unique experience. I was at one university for 32 years at Long Beach State, and I think I had every type of contract you can imagine. I had a series of 1 years, a series of 5 years. I had a 7-year rollover contract, and I had no clue I was the business manager of our USA team for a few years, writing contracts, and I still had no clue what to put in them. So I guess I'm turning to both of you and asking you, what would you do now? Let's say you're a coach, a college coach, or, what would you put into the contracts today? What have you learned? What would you have in there? What would you recommend? And Penny, let's start with you.
Well, let's say we go to a university that's not a Power 5. Let's say we go to a mid-major. So you're not going to go in there making six figures. But what you can do is, let's say you have an average salary. What you can do is really make sure the incentives add up. Your team's APR, your team's GPA, your team's 20 game or plus season, your coach of the year, your just all of those things. If you beat a top 25 team, if you beat a top 50 team, so you can pack enough incentives on the incentive side to really help bring in more money and help, I think, pay you your worth. Because I know you're going to work hard. If you're going to work hard and you can't have the base salary that you like, well, then let's pack it on another side in the incentive package.
You see, Gary, I think I dodged the bullet for all those years. I hear today it's a little more difficult, with people running into all kinds of problems. How do you protect yourself with one of these contracts? What would you put in to protect yourself?
Yeah, Brian, it's a good question. I think that it probably depends in what way we're talking about, coaches running into problems and protecting themselves. What Penny just talked about in terms of, what you want to put into a contract, particularly, as she said, at a mid-major level, all of those are great ideas in terms of incentives. And the hope is that these are schools that are valuing the sport of volleyball, like clearly they were valuing it at, the places that Penny's been in her career, who are willing to reward coaches for doing things that, are really difficult to do, particularly at a mid-major when we get into the idea of beating a top 25 team and, beating a top 50 team and those types of things. Speaking more about this day and age right now, and I think why we're on this call right now, it's going to be more difficult, in my opinion, for volleyball coaches to get away with certain things because of what the financial implications of coronavirus and COVID-19 are, particularly at that mid-major level. And as I spoke yesterday on the ABCA webinar, the effect that this virus is going to have from a financial implication is not going to be so much on volleyball based on what coaches are getting paid as a base salary. It's going to be unwilling to do things in the other areas. So what I think about and worry about and talk to the coaches that I work with, they're going to be things that we just can't get out of contracts now. Like, it's my expectation that every contract moving forward, no matter the sport, volleyball, basketball, football, whatever it is going to include specific language that allows the school to change the coach's salaries or to furlough a coach if there is a pandemic or some other type of situation that arises like we're seeing right now. It's tough for a coach to be able to protect themselves, getting back to your question, against something like that, unless we're in a situation where a school just really wants a coach badly and is willing to do whatever it takes to get that coach, which in our sport, I think, is a little bit more rare than it is in the sports that create millions and millions of dollars when all things are good for collegiate athletics. But the ways in which coaches should be protecting themselves really come down to their termination language. What can they be fired for? Can they be suspended? And what happens if they're terminated without cause? And again, just for anybody who's on this call or watching this who doesn't understand, being terminated without cause means that you're fired because you lost too many matches or because the school just wants a different coach. It means that there was not necessarily wrongdoing by you that resulted in your termination. If you're terminated for cause, almost universally, you're not going to get anything, and there's no way to really protect against that. But if you're terminated without cause, there needs to be something in there that protects you, that if, God forbid, this happens, you're going to be okay.
Gary, just changing gears a little bit, how do you feel about using a lawyer and how it might affect, you getting a job. That's always been a concern that I've had. I'm sometimes afraid that, athletic directors might look at that and say, well, I'm not so sure, we want that guy if he's going to be represented by a lawyer.
Sure, Bob. I'm sure this isn't going to surprise you. I'm all for it. I'm all for coaches using lawyers and agents. So, but no, speaking more specifically to the question, I think there are kind of three ways to go, right? The third way, which I don't think is great, is not using anybody and a coach just going in there on their own. The first way that I think is good is what it sounds like, and again, Penny and I haven't spoke, but it sounds like what Penny did, which is that she used an attorney. And it doesn't sound to me, and Penny can correct me if I'm wrong, that the attorney necessarily was an agent or had an expertise with coaching contracts, but the attorney knew what to look for and knew Penny's business, and I'm sure had some comparisons that he or she could use in figuring out what made sense for Penny in ways to add value to her contract. And whether somebody uses me or somebody uses anybody else, I mean this, I really don't care as long as they're using somebody, because I think as the coaches are treated better as an industry, that rising tide raises all boats, and that's really important. The second way is to use an agent, right? And I'm a little bit, I guess, lucky in the sense that I am an attorney and I'm also an agent where I have an expertise in coaching contracts, in specific women's sports or Olympic sports. And, they are treated differently, certainly, than the premier sports at colleges and universities, being football and men's basketball. The rules are a little bit different. But Bob, to get back just to the short answer, I think whoever it is that you use, it's important that the school understands the role that person has there. The coach isn't bringing that person in to change the rules of the game, right? Like Penny's attorney, I'm sure, didn't go into the academy and say, hey, you pay her $500,000 or she's out. This isn't a Jerry Maguire situation. But what it is it's making sure that the school recognizes that a coach isn't in this by themselves and that there's somebody there who's going to have strictly that person's business interest in mind. The school's goal, they can want a coach as much as they want and be happy with a coach, but their goal at the end of the day is to put the school in the best position possible. And it's really important that coaches have somebody that can do that for them. So my rule of thumb is that I'm lucky. I've been representing coaches for over 7 years in various sports with a focus, like I said at the beginning, in women's basketball. And a lot of the times the people making the decisions in volleyball are the same ones who made the decisions in women's basketball. And I'm able to leverage those relationships so people know that I'm not a snake and I'm not a Jerry Maguire just in there to try to expose the school for all the money they're worth. We want to put our clients in the best position possible. And the way that we do that usually makes us feel like less of a threat to the university. So they've been fine whenever we get involved. And if it's a school that's not as comfortable with it, then I'm just as comfortable working more behind the scenes where the school doesn't need to know that we exist. We'll work through the coach. But whatever it takes to put the coach in the best position possible is what we're going to do.
I think it's another set of eyes. I'm sorry. I just think it's another set of eyes for somebody to see something that a younger coach wouldn't see. I think Brian hit the nail on the head. He was there 32 years. And I know early on, he probably didn't know what he didn't know. But now that we know that we have people that can go in front and add value to our work, that's the benefit. I don't think it's a thing where any institution should feel threatened, but it's somebody that can speak their language when it comes down to contracts. Garry can speak their language when they're dealing with the finance guy, something that maybe a shy coach may be afraid to do in really trying to tell them what she or he's worth. But Garry can do it, or a representative can do that.
How about on the timing, Penny, or Garry? Either one of you guys. Is there the right timing to bring an agent / lawyer involved?
Penny, how did you handle that?
When I first started talking to the United States Air Force Academy, once he gave a baseline of where I would start and he gave me a contract, I physically emailed the contract to the lawyer. At that point, I stepped back and they started talking. Same thing here. When I first came out for my interview and I was offered the job, I then inserted my attorney, who then took over all of the negotiating powers. I stepped back, and then when we came to an agreement, I signed the paperwork, but not before that he's spoken with me and said, does this fit with you? Is this okay? Are you all right with that?
Yeah, and Brian, for me, I think that it's a little bit different only because the majority, like I mentioned, the majority of the coaches that I work with in volleyball are Power 5 head coaches. So I'm usually communicating with the school during the search in terms of making them aware that a particular coach is interested in their job to begin with. So serving as that type of resource or that reference for that coach, the school knows from the outset that they're a client of mine. So by the time we get to the actual offering of the contract, they're already aware that I exist. And whether I'm dealing with the sport administrator or the athletic director on that contract, or I'm dealing with the school CFO, legal counsel, some non-athletic position within the department, they know that I do exist. So for the most part, my experience in volleyball has been that the introduction is kind of already there because of the role that for what I do as a career, it's not just the contract that I help with. I help with the other parts of getting the job as well.
Okay, so I guess it's my turn. Gary, are you ready? As I listened yesterday
Watch out.
to you, watch out. As I listened to you yesterday, Gary, on the ABCA webinar, I was thinking back on my last 3 D1 jobs. And Penny, you were there as a player with one of the schools. Well, I asked myself now, why didn't I get advice from an attorney? Why didn't I retain an attorney? And or if so, why didn't I do it sooner? Gary, I'm going to go first to you, and I want you to address these 2 questions. And Penny, all of your experience, what's your advice now as a veteran coach? First one, the cost of hiring an attorney, is it a luxury or is it a necessity? And 2, worried about how it would affect one's future and how will it? Because Bob kind of touched on that. But those were 2 things that I thought at a young age of 23. All right, Gary, you can go first.
Yeah, let me hit on the second question, Ruth. The you being worried about how it will affect one's future, or a coach being worried. Again, I may be biased. I don't see any reason why a coach should be worried about hiring somebody for how it would affect their future. If anything, it can only help their future, in my opinion. The idea that, people, the powers that be in our sport, talking to each other and saying, hey, you better watch out for that person because, they had somebody check out their contract. I mean, it's silly. And it's not a silly question. It's a real question that coaches think about. But if that's a concern, I think it's silly because if we're talking about college sports, I think we all know, athletic administration today is resembling coaching in terms of how much athletic directors are moving around and taking new jobs and having to leave where they are in order to move on and move up. So the idea that, that anybody would be looked at negatively in terms of bringing an expert in to help them with their contract document or, the actual job search process, that's not a concern in my opinion at all. In terms of the cost of hiring, I can't speak for everybody. And I'm sure Penny can talk about her experience. For me, it's my goal that whatever our cost is made up for, multiple times by what we're adding in value. And if that's not the case, then I'm not going to have a business. So for me, our general, and I'm happy to share it, our general fee is a percentage of a coach's salary. And it's in my opinion, it's a small percentage, but it's a percentage. And the way that I look at it is whatever that percentage is the coach X% better off in their career by working with us, by working with me and Coaches Inc. and who I work with. And to me, that answer is overwhelmingly yes, because situations like what we're dealing with right now in terms of a pandemic and coaches having protection, it's more than just are they getting me that X percent raise. It's when something negative comes up in my career, do I have somebody who's been through this before to help me through it? When my AD approaches me about taking a salary reduction because our budgets are down right now, is there somebody there that can help me either not take as big a reduction or explain to me what my rights are, or turn it into something where I end up getting job security down the road because I'm helping the school out right now? I think that it's imperative that that coach gets that value back, whatever they're paying. But in terms of the cost, I think most people that are working with coaches anywhere recognize that, nobody's really getting rich off one coach, and it's important that you have that value because word of mouth is everything in this business.
Okay, that's great. You were in elementary school. I needed you when I was first coaching. Okay, Penny, we're running close on time, but I know, Penny, you want to give a couple comments. And you go right ahead, Penny.
I totally agree with Gary. I think the new thing is that the niche that Gary has found is trying to protect a coach in something as unprecedented as what we're living through right now, just trying to protect a coach who would ever predict a pandemic. But I think the niche is also for coaches is to bring more added value to themselves, not just winning championships, but also graduating students, but also doing something else across the campus, making yourself more relevant, which is more important now than anything, is that we are buying into the student athletes and we are producing leaders on and off the court, on and off the field, and that they're active in the community. So I'm going to leave it at that because the guy is doing my lawn right now and you're going to hear him.
Okay.
Ruth, can I ask a real quick question of Gary? Let's say he takes a percentage for negotiating the contract and he negotiates a 5-year contract. Are you on for 5 years, or you just get that percentage for the contract you negotiate for that year? How long does that relationship last?
Yeah, so there's kind of two things going on. There's, a relationship that I have with my client where we have a representation agreement for a certain amount of time, and that can extend and continue for as long as it is. And then there's the contract that we help a coach enter into. And to kind of sum it up, what I am not is I'm not a headhunter. So to me, I don't want to be working with coaches, no matter the sport, if the goal is just get me the job. So in that case, any coach that I work with, my goal is to work with them from the time that we start working together until the day that they retire. But in order to protect against coaches hiring us to just help them get the job and then saying, see you later, thanks for everything, it's my business model, it's our business model that we're owed commission from the entirety of the contract that we help a coach enter into while we're working together.
And Penny, very quickly, just a quick answer to this question. When you negotiated your contracts, did you pay a percentage to your attorney, and did you just pay for that negotiation, or did you keep him on retainer?
I'm so fortunate. He's a dear friend of mine. I worked for them. It was freebie. However, I will say this, though. He did go on and negotiate a contract for Danielle Scott after he negotiated mine. So I did bring him business.
Well, there you go. Good
go.
job by you.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank both of you for being involved today. The information was great. I'm sure our group more than appreciates you being on. I'm going to talk about next week, what we're going to do next week now. Next week is September 16th, and as I understand it, the NC2A is going to make a decision. The NC2A Executive Committee is going to announce if we will have a spring championship, how many teams, and the date. And we think the recommendation is for 48 teams, 32 automatics, and 16 at-large, maybe. And it's to be played the week of April 23rd to 25th. Now, I think that's what we've heard through the grapevine is the recommendation. If this is true, and if the executive committee does approve that, then it's going to open up recruiting big time, because now schools and coaches are going to know what they're looking towards, when they're going to have a season, and that's going to start to get answered. And next week, we have two women who head up two separate recruiting services to talk to us about how they help players get scholarships and how their programs function. And we will have Sue Weber on from NCSA Sports and Sam Walensky from My Recruiting Solutions. So make sure you tune in and listen to what recruiting services have to offer, because I honestly don't know the answers to these questions. So I'm excited to hear both of these women.
And thanks to both Garry and Penny for being on our show today.
Thanks,
All
Garry.
right.
Thanks, Garry.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Penny.
Absolutely, you guys.
All right, here we
Great
go.
job.
Fall Master Coaches virtual clinics are now available for you, your team, or your coaches, or an in-person clinic in 2021. Please head over to our Instagram account, click on the bio, click on the virtual clinic link, or you may even scan our QR code that will take you directly to all of our information. A special shout out to our partners, Baden Sports and SNA Sports. Join us next week for Master Coaches Weekly Buzz. Follow us on Facebook at Volleyball Master Coaches, Instagram and Twitter, VB Master Coaches. And all of our weekly buzz shows are on YouTube, and you may access these by going directly to our Instagram account. Click on the link of the bio and enjoy listening to leaders in our sport address current issues and trends. Register by November 6th for the 2020 ABCA virtual convention and save $50 and get the first opportunity for small group training sessions and career center appointments. Now, remember, after our host closes our weekly buzz today, you may stay on live and join our Master Coaches Buzz Reaction for an opportunity to hear and engage in our most recent talks. Now, let's go to our host, John Foreman, who will update us on his upcoming coaching conversations. John?
Thanks, Ruth. Thanks to our guests who already left, but we appreciate them anyway. And I'm looking forward to hearing what the scouting services have next week, because I'm using some of them from a coaching perspective. Right now, I'm dealing with technology issues, so coaching conversations are a little bit on hold. Hopefully that gets resolved pretty quick. I do have some people coming to help my team out in a certain kind of coaching conversations starting on Friday. Ruth, eventually I'm going to get you involved if we ever get the dates sorted out. And maybe I'll get the other three tied in to do some talks with my players as well. I don't know. I'm not sure how that would fly with Bob talking to members of another school's team. So maybe not him. So anyway, stay up to date on coaching conversations, on everything with the buzz and all that at coachingvb.com, at coachingvb on Twitter, coachingvb.com on the web, on the blog, and on the Facebook page, which most of you are watching right now, Coaching Volleyball.